There's one shoujo trope that I find myself always set for. The cross-dressing heroine. The girl who's defying gender norms and living her life more like a boy. The girl who's pretending to be a boy for the plot, or the girl who's assumed to be a boy by her peers due to her androgynous appearance. These kinds of characters usually rebel against the restrictive notion of being ladylike, seeking to explore personhood beyond a gender marker, or exploring what gender really is to them. These kinds of characters operate on the understanding that gender is a set of societal expectations, stylings, and behaviors that are often associated with a person's biological sex. Gender is only a performance, which is fitting because these cross-dressing heroines have their roots in theater. The first cross-dressing heroine in manga is Sapphire from Princess Knight by Osamu Tezuka, and he found inspiration in Takarazuka Revue, a musical theater troupe that is entirely female. Women playing both the female and the male roles, and the women who play men retain their masculine styling and behaviors in their day-to-day lives as well. This is done to further sell the fantasy of these women being men on stage. Women performing the idea of a man both on and off the stage finds its way in other forms of entertainment through characters like Sapphire from Princess Knight and Haruhi from Ouran High School Host Club. And I want to talk about it, because this trope is often used to explore gender in a way that I find truly fascinating. The cross-dressing heroine in shoujo can be divided into three types: the tomboy, the one doing it for the plot, and the one who is probably non-binary. Before we truly dive into the tomboy archetype, I do want to note that the way tomboy characters are written, there can be a lot of strong evidence in the text for these characters to be non-binary or transmasculine. But I have chosen to identify them as a more tomboyish character due to how the text uses these characters to explore gender roles and equality, non-conforming gender expressions, and sexuality. Because at the end of the day, characters are just tools for the narrative and not actually people with interior lives and existences beyond the narrative that they serve. And I'm non-binary myself, so please don't get it twisted that I'm trying to erase non-binary identities or, God forbid, being transphobic about it. Anyway, let's talk about Oscar, the reason I have this disclaimer. In The Rose of Versailles, Oscar was raised to be a boy, despite being born a girl. She's the youngest of 5 girls and was raised to follow in her father's footsteps, becoming a royal guard and training in military combat as if she were a boy. What sets Oscar apart from other characters who cross-dress for an outside reason, much like she does, is that Oscar isn't simply a narrative of a woman pretending to be a man. While often mistaken for a man, she's recognized as a woman by those around her most of the time. And while she occupies the role of a man socially and politically, she is adamant that she's a woman and does use she/her pronouns in public. Her authority is also challenged at times due to the men not respecting her because she is a biological woman. But her masculine presentation is more than just a plot contrivance. It's a part of her identity, and she does experience bouts of gender dysphoria when having to present femininely, and is deeply uncomfortable with the idea of assuming the feminine role in romance. To be honest, Oscar could very easily fit in the likely non-binary reading of this whole cross-dressing heroine character archetype. Oscar is actually based on Ryoko Akita's own experiences as a tall and androgynous teenager, but Oscar's inner world and conflict with gender and what she aligns with is very reminiscent of struggling to identify a non-binary identity. She ultimately prefers to be seen in an androgynous manner, genderless, and seen for who she is at her core and what she can contribute to the world, not what society tells her she should be based on how they perceive her. As much as I love a non-binary read of a gender non-conforming character, I do think Oscar may be more of a gender non-conforming woman. The Rose of Versailles focuses more on gender roles instead of gender identity, doubly so if you compare it with Ryoko Akita's other work that explicitly explores gender identity and the trans identity, Claudine. Oscar's character looks at the patriarchal society and demands to be seen as an equal. Her masculine tendencies work in her favor for being taken seriously, helping her earn the respect of those who would otherwise disrespect her. She is a woman existing in a context where women are treated differently just because they're women. It'd be easy to read her character as a woman who wants to be seen as equal, shedding the weight of gender biases instead of a character seeking to shed the gender identity placed upon her. And her struggle with recognizing her gender is due to the contrast of being a woman that's expected to be a man, and the way she enjoys the privilege and power she gains with her social proximity to masculinity. Oscar is interesting because she does show romantic interest in women and enjoys flirting with women. However, she is personally offended when called a lesbian, indicating she's mad about bi erasure or that she may see herself more as a man when liking women. And when Oscar is romantically interested in men, she's worried about not being woman enough for them. She wants to be seen as a woman in these contexts, but a woman that is not the stereotypical woman. She identifies as a woman, but in a way where womanhood is very unique to her, and she doesn't want to be crammed into the box of being ladylike. This gender fluctuation based on who you're interested in is an experience that I recognize as a very non-binary one. But the idea of gender fluctuating based on how one wants to be perceived in a romantic context could likely be based on societal expectations in Oscar's time. It wouldn't really be socially acceptable for Oscar to be gay in any flavor, and that paints how she pines for those that she is romantically interested in. Most of her gender dysphoria in the text stems from the romantic expectations of a woman once a man she doesn't really care for starts trying to marry her. Up until then, she had been content with her position in life, but being married would change her role, making her a feminine wife, something that is in direct contrast with the royal guard she was raised to be. She also detests the lack of freedom and personal choice that is suddenly pushed towards her because a man is interested in her. It's a huge conflict point between her and her father. To contrast this with a romantic relationship that Oscar is actually interested in, her endgame romance, Andre, doesn't force her into the role of a woman, instead accepting her as she is, masculinity and all, letting Oscar remain true to herself. She retains her free will and isn't expected to cram herself into the ideal woman box. Andre likes her for who she is, not who she could be if she conformed to what was expected of women. The beauty of Oscar's character is that she can so easily be read in a few different ways depending on what you need to hear. But regardless of how you read her, Oscar's character still stands in opposition to the ugliness of gender expectations and how gender roles can strip you of your personhood, reducing you to a certain box that can't fit all of what makes you, you. And while that is a very non-binary and trans experience, the way it's explored in The Rose of Versailles puts a heavy focus and a magnifying lens on the constraints of womanhood and what is expected of a woman, even if the woman herself doesn't really align with that. And in this way, Oscar is kind of like my mom. That only makes sense to me and people in my real life who know my mom. She's a lot like Oscar in the sense that she is a woman, she identifies as a woman, but she plays with gender expression in a way where she is using elements of masculinity to break through any sort of biases or constraints that she experiences due to the fact that she is a woman. That might be why I read Oscar the way that I do. The other tomboy that I wanted to look at is Utena Tenjo. Revolutionary Girl Utena, at its core, is a deconstruction of a fairy tale, and Utena is determined to be the prince. Utena wears a male uniform despite being a girl, and she does get in trouble for this quite a lot, but the funniest thing about this whole situation is her teacher is usually upset about the gender presentation of it all, when the real issue is the uniform she wears isn't even the male uniform for her school. She literally just shows up in a random uniform and rocks with it. Uniform debacle aside, Utena is most herself, assuming the more masculine role. Her interests and her personality align with things that are stereotyped as masculine and tomboyish as well. She's brash, she's athletic, and she's quick to protect those that she cares about. Utena mostly identifies with being a girl, but kind of in the way a butch lesbian is a girl. Definitely still a girl, but one that doesn't adhere to societal expectations of womanhood and femininity. Utena is also ridiculed by some of her classmates for her lack of conformity. This does seem to bother her a bit, because why can't she be a girl and still do her own thing? We also see Utena go through a bit of a forced feminization arc after losing Anthy to Toga. Utena and Toga have a strange relationship. He is interested in her, but he seeks to make her conform to what he thinks a girl should be, not really interested in her as she is. Utena should stop trying to be a prince and instead be Toga's princess. He even tells her that he is the prince that she's been looking for. And during this forced feminization arc, as the fans like to call it, Utena wears the female uniform for her school and does behave in a more reserved, quiet, ideal ladylike way. And she is incredibly depressed. She's shuts herself off from her friends and her peers, and she is not the same person. It gets to the point that her best friend Wakaba has to step in and push her to be herself because Wakaba doesn't know who that is, and it's scaring her. This little character arc for Utena resonates a lot with women who are more tomboyish and feel more comfortable with a masculine presentation but still identify as women. Utena, like Oscar, touches on the experience of having gender expectations pushed upon you and having to find your own meaning and your identity beyond the box that the world tries to cram you into. Utena is repeatedly pushed into the feminine girl box by those who wish to make her conform and take advantage of her, and she has to fight to stay true to herself, to be the prince that she knows she can be. She fights for her right to exist as she is and to love as she chooses. Utena's story resonates with many, regardless of their own struggles with gender, and she especially resonates with queer women who maybe don't conform to the ideal idea of what a woman should be. She's a character that isn't afraid to advocate for herself and others, and she isn't afraid of stepping up and being a better man than the nasty, predatory men in the show. She's a female prince, strong in her identity as a gender non-conforming woman, and adamant that she's going to protect the princesses in her life that need protecting. And I admire her a lot for that, and the way that she carves a path for herself instead of doing what's expected of her. She's a really great example for girls who don't fit the girly mold but still feeling connected to girlhood, and I think that's an important character archetype to have. I feel like a lot of people who are tomboyish are looked at as if they're not girl enough or if they're not performing girlhood correctly, but I don't think there's any one correct way to perform a gender, and Utena shows us that. For characters that cross-dress just for the plot, we're gonna look at Mizuki from Hana-kimi. Mizuki is pretending to be a boy so she can attend an all-boys school in order to meet her idol, a high jumper named Sano. And for the most part, she passes as a really cute, kind of weird boy. Mizuki retains a lot of her more feminine traits with the way that she approaches situations in ways that aren't typical of how boys are socialized to do things. However, she's also feisty and quick to pick fights when she feels like it's necessary. She's a little bit of a hothead sometimes. Mizuki is decidedly a cis woman, only pretending to be a boy for the plot. She's comfortable with being a woman and has only put up the charade of being a boy in order to go to school with Sano. Mizuki has moments of being envious of other girls, wishing her body had developed more curves, wishing that Sano could see her as a girl. She still desires to be a girl, and this is what makes it clear that Mizuki isn't cross-dressing for any gender reasons, it's all for the love of the game. Mizuki is comfortable blending the feminine and the masculine. Her character only struggles with trying not to blow her cover. She connects with her friends as a boy, making connections with other characters as a girl, and uses her unique perspective to befriend her queer classmates as well. These cross-dressing narratives, while not directly opposing strict gender binaries and gender roles the way stories like The Rose of Versailles does and Revolutionary Girl Utena, still address gender in a very interesting way. These narratives showcase that girls are just as capable of boys in a way that place the girls and the boys on an equal playing field. When a girl is pretending to be a boy, she is assumed to be a boy and have the strengths of a boy, and when she is able to keep up with the boys, it further proves to the watchers that girls are not different or weaker or inferior. It's kind of like the movie Mulan, where she's able to pretend to be a boy, and while there was a little bit of a learning curve, she eventually was able to keep up with the other soldiers and do just as well as any other guy. And it's the same thing. These narratives also highlight the ways that a person benefits from having both a feminine and masculine perspective. Mizuki and her peers all enrich each other's lives with their unique perspectives, and while Mizuki is treated as a weird boy, much of what she's considered weird for are traits that would be considered maybe more normal for a girl. Well, maybe except for trying to be Steven Universe and befriend someone who's bullying and threatening you. That level of warmth and kindness speaks more for Mizuki's personality than her gender. But she's able to use her experiences of bonding with other girls and patching up relationships after negative experiences to push through and form a relationship with Naoko, neutralizing whatever threat they may have been towards each other. Naoko is also more feminine than his peers, making it a bit difficult for these more stereotypical boys to relate to him in a way that Mizuki doesn't struggle with. Cross-dressing for the plot also shows that men and women aren't all that different. Sure, sometimes certain characters will oppose that notion, but I think the very nature of having a character be able to move fluidly between presenting and being perceived as a boy or a girl highlights that at the end of the day, both men and women are just people with similar experiences. Mizuki bonds with her peers based on experiences like having a crush, a love for track and field, and the shared experience of going to school together. Her peers think that she's a boy, for the most part. But the audience knows that she is a girl, sharing these experiences on an equal level with her male peers. Hopefully this isn't like a groundbreaking discovery. People are people, and I'm pretty sure you guys all know that, but sometimes people need a reminder. There are other stories like this one where the female lead has to pretend to be a boy for the sake of the plot. Prince of Freya sees a timid, athletic girl pretending to be the prince after she encounters him dying, or Power, which I think in English is called She's Got Game. It's a series about a girl who pretends to be a boy because her father enrolled her in a school as a boy, so that she could join the basketball team and carry on his legacy. These kinds of series can end up enforcing gender binaries, showcasing how these girls struggle to pretend to be boys, and highlighting the differences between the ways that boys and girls are socialized. Mizuki often finds herself doing something and then internally freaking out because she may have just blown her cover if boys don't act like that. But at the end of the day, all the stories I have read or watched that fall into this category does more to connect these characters as people, not place a rift between boy and girl. And I do think these stories are important. We need to keep in mind that a lot of these stories are written for teenagers or younger. And you guys remember how kids would start to separate based on gender, and how girls would think boys were gross and stupid, and boys would think girls would have cooties and all that? These kinds of stories help break down those separations that we make or are taught. And while boys and girls may have differences, they can't be all that different if characters like Mizuki can just pretend to be a boy and not only get away with it for the most part, but thrive. We gotta talk about some non-binary characters. The first one I want to highlight is Sapphire from Princess Knight, the OG. Sapphire possesses the heart of a girl and the heart of a boy, being somewhat of an allegory for gender fluidity. Whether Tezuka meant it that way or not, that is how it comes off. She shifts from boy to girl depending on what she needs. Sapphire is predominantly a girl. She was born a girl and must pretend to be a boy to the outside world, so that she can eventually take over the throne. She even falls in love with a boy in a girl way, being that she loves him as a girl and not a boy. Sapphire's points for being gender fluid mostly comes from the dual hearts that she has, making it difficult for her adversaries to prove that she's a girl pretending to be a boy. For all intents and purposes, the characters in this series are basically dolls, devoid of biological sex markers, and their gender is determined by whatever heart God gave them before they were born. Sapphire, having both a girl heart and a boy heart, cannot be proven to be a girl through the magical means used in the series. She also possesses both masculine and feminine social traits that she swaps between depending on who she's with, and how she is wanting to present. In this regard, Sapphire speaks to the gender fluid experience, being both a boy and a girl, despite the series ultimately deciding Sapphire will be a girl. She does lose her boy heart, but Sapphire eventually grows back into her boyish traits. She learns to fight like she once did with her boy heart and be herself with only her girl heart. This is very much a girls can do what boys can do narrative. I did hesitate to put her in the non-binary category, but I think her getting to live her truth as a girl after having to hide it for so long can also speak to the trans experience. I will admit this is absolutely a reading of her character that is not intended at all and probably sounds like I'm grasping for straws. Many see her ending up as just a girl marrying the love of her life, as the series enforcing gender roles onto Sapphire, making her conform to being a girl. But I do believe it's what she wanted. She chooses to be a girl in secret, and now she gets to do it publicly with her full chest. I don't think this ending for her should take away from what gender fluid people resonate with in her character, and despite this being how the story ends, a lot of people do still use Princess Knight as an example of gender fluidity in anime and manga. On the other hand, we have Haruhi Fujioka from Ouran High School Host Club. She is probably non-binary. Haruhi is regarded as a non-binary icon not just by myself, but by many queer Ouran High School Host Club fans. Haruhi is a character whose cross-dressing is more of an accident, as she's assumed to be a boy due to her androgynous style, and she doesn't really care to correct anyone. She even describes gender as something that doesn't really matter, because to her, the only thing that's important is what's on the inside. This is something that stood out to many as a take on gender that aligns with certain identities that would fall under the non-binary umbrella. She doesn't mind presenting as a boy, and even finds working with the host club as a boy fun. She also doesn't mind being a girl. She is not opposed to the more feminine things, and she blends the feminine and masculine in a way that makes her character come off as someone who can still be a cis woman, but also speaks strongly to the experiences of a non-binary person. The gender apathy, the way Haruhi plays with how she is presented and perceived, and the refusal of gendered expectations are all something that I think many non-binary people can relate to. There's a moment in episode 8 of the anime where the host club is having a beach day, and Haruhi comes across some of her fellow peers being harassed by weird men. She stands up for them as if she were a man, starting a fight with the men, putting herself at risk because it was the right thing to do, and it didn't matter to her if she was a boy or a girl in that situation. It's a point of conflict between her and the other members of the host club, most notably Tamaki, who see her as a girl and wish that she wouldn't put herself at risk, enforcing the idea that women are weaker than men and in need of protection. A notion that is frustrating regardless of how you identify, but can be doubly frustrating to be pushed upon you when you don't identify as a woman because it's like, girl, that's not even me. But also they're wrong. Her refusal to budge on this asserts herself as someone who's equal to the men in her life. When Kyoya tries to scare her into accepting her weak points by pretending to assault her, she calls him out, saying he wouldn't go all the way through with it because it's not like him. He wouldn't gain anything from it. He has no motive, and she knows him well enough to know that she's not actually in danger. Kyoya isn't going to suddenly turn into something he's not just because she's a girl, and Haruhi doesn't willingly throw herself into dangerous situations that she doesn't think she's going to be okay in. She knows that Kyoya is only trying to back up his friend, pretending to be the bad guy, and not actually a threat. This makes the message that she's weaker because she's born a girl fall a little bit flat on its face. It's not what she's getting from this moment, and the audience shouldn't either. I do also think it's worth noting that Haruhi isn't in extra danger because of her biological sex. She biffed it in the altercation with the men on the beach because she is not a fighter. She only intervened to help those girls and get them out of a predatory situation because it was something she could do without being put in the same boat because she knew those men saw her as a boy. She's leveraging the way other people see her to do the most good. This point isn't really hammered in the show, but it is likely a part of Haruhi's thought process. She doesn't see herself as a girl necessarily, she sees herself as a person who in that moment was presenting as a boy, and she worked with it. Gender doesn't matter, only her actions. I do think Haruhi is a great character for exploring gender expectations and gender roles for women. And she can be an empowering female character since she stands up for herself and embraces non-traditional expressions of gender. But Haruhi's character laughs in the face of a gender binary. She's apathetic towards how she's perceived, playing the role of the man and the woman. Narratively, Ouran puts more focus on the way Haruhi plays with gender instead of how her character explores gender roles, which is what makes her feel different from characters like Oscar from the Rose of Versailles. That's why I think Haruhi could be non-binary, but she's got a job to do, so she'll worry about that later. The cross-dressing heroine, while not necessarily a queer archetype, fulfills that fantasy of being able to shed the constraints of gender. I wish all it took for me to pass as a boy was a haircut and a baggy sweater. But beyond a trans identity, these cross-dressing heroines are girls that seek to bend the rules of gender with their expression of self, or the fluidity of bending their own gender. These girls are more often than not written to challenge the status quo or say something about gender roles and the effects of misogyny. They rebel against rigid social constraints and seek to explore who people are outside of the gendered boxes we place ourselves in. The cross-dressing heroine isn't unique to shoujo manga either. I mean, Mulan has been my favorite Disney movie since I was a toddler, and I can name at least 2 live-action American films off the top of my head that are about a girl pretending to be a boy for whatever reason. And there are real-life examples of this happening throughout history. We all seek to escape the constraints of being perceived as a woman, no matter where we are in the world. I think this video also served as my list of my favorite gender non-conforming women, or cross-dressing heroines in shoujo specifically. So it's only polite for me to ask, who are your guys' favorite cross-dressing heroines? Also, did anybody else ride the pipeline of Mulan being their favorite Disney movie as a toddler to really enjoying this trope to also possibly being non-binary or trans? I would love to know. I feel like that's a very common experience. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching this video, and I will see you guys in the next one, whatever that may be. Bye!